You're getting your bicycle ready for a ride, and you pump up a completely flat tire. At first, you're pushing air in, but the pressure barely changes, right? The tire just inflates to its normal size.
But then, suddenly, as the tire fills out, the pressure absolutely shoots up. You leave it outside. The hot summer sun beats down on it. And by the afternoon, the pressure has spiked even higher, maybe even dangerously high. Why does the exact same amount of air behave so differently just because the temperature changed?
Well, by the end of this explainer, you are going to understand exactly how gases behave, the specific formulas behind those behaviors, and how to actually calculate real-world examples, just like that bulging bike tire. We're going to completely break down the mechanics of the invisible air all around us.
Section 1. Behavior of gas molecules. To solve the mystery of our bike tire, we first need to zoom way in.
Think about a completely packed elevator versus a massive empty sports stadium. In liquids and solids, atoms and molecules are like people in that crowded elevator. They are tightly packed together and highly sensitive to the physical forces pushing and pulling between them. But gases are mostly empty space. The molecules are separated by massive distances relative to their size. And because they're so far apart, those intermolecular forces between them are incredibly weak. We can practically just ignore them unless the molecules happen to violently crash into one another.
And because of all this vast empty space, gases possess some truly unique properties. For one, they have the largest coefficients of volume expansion. That means they expand and contract incredibly fast when the temperature changes. But here is the wildest part. Unlike solids and liquids, which all have totally different expansion rates depending on what they're made of, almost all gases behave identically. Because those huge gaps mean intermolecular forces can be safely ignored, it honestly doesn't matter if you have oxygen, nitrogen, or helium. They all play by the exact same rules.
Which brings us to Section 2, the ideal gas law. Now that we've got the basic physical idea of gases being predictable, mostly empty space, let's look at the math.
This is the ideal gas law, typically written in physics as P times V equals N times K times T. Let's break this down step by step, just like we're at a whiteboard. On the left side, we have P, which stands for the absolute pressure of the gas, multiplied by V, the volume it occupies. Over on the right side, we have big N, which represents the total number of individual atoms or molecules bouncing around in that space. Then we multiply that by T, the absolute temperature. So what actually ties the two sides together? That's our lowercase k.
That lowercase k is the Boltzmann constant, named after the brilliant Austrian physicist Ludwig Boltzmann. Its value is 1.38 times 10 to the negative 23rd joules per Kelvin. This incredibly tiny number is the magic bridge in our equation. It fundamentally connects the mechanical energy of the moving particles to the temperature of the gas.
Okay, wait, this is absolutely crucial. Every single year, thousands of students get exam questions wrong because they just plug degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit directly into this equation. Don't do it. You must always convert your temperature to absolute temperature, which means kelvins. Why? Well, think about it. Celsius can be 0 or even a negative number. If you plug a 0 into the ideal gas law, you'd end up calculating 0 volume or negative pressure, which is physically impossible. Just add 273 to your Celsius temperature, and you are good to go.
Let's make this easier with an example and connect it right back to our real-life bike tire. Let's say you inflated the tire at a cool 18 degrees Celsius, and later it sits in the hot sun at 35 degrees. First step, convert to Kelvin. 18 plus 273 is 291 Kelvin, and 35 plus 273 is 308 Kelvin. Since the tire's volume isn't really changing much, and the number of air molecules sealed inside is locked in, our formula tells us that pressure and temperature are directly proportional. We just set up a simple ratio. The final pressure over the initial pressure equals the final temperature over the initial temperature. 308 divided by 291 gives us about a 6% increase in pressure. The tire bulges because the added heat energy literally makes the molecules hit the tire walls faster and harder.
Section 3. Enter Avogadro's number. Now that ratio trick is great for a contained space, but you might be wondering, how on earth do we actually count big N, the total number of molecules, when we're dealing with something massive like the atmosphere?
Counting individual gas molecules is practically impossible because there are just too many of them. A single cubic centimeter of air contains tens of quintillions of molecules. So, to make the math manageable, scientists rely on this massive figure, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd power. This is known as Avogadro's number.
To wrap your head around how unbelievably massive this number really is, consider this classic textbook analogy. If you had Avogadro's number of ping pong balls, they wouldn't just fill up your room. They would literally cover the entire surface of the Earth to a depth of roughly 40 kilometers. Good luck finding that many paddles, right?
Because Big N is so annoyingly large, scientists created a shortcut called the mole. A mole is simply a package, a standard unit of measurement. Just like you know the word dozen means exactly 12 of something, the word mole means exactly Avogadro's number of something. Formally, it's defined as the amount of a substance containing as many particles as there are atoms in exactly 12 grams of carbon-12. It basically lets us group quintillions of atoms into one simple, easy-to-use package.
Section 4, the chemistry version. Because grouping things by moles is so incredibly convenient, we actually have a second version of the ideal gas law.
If you've ever taken a chemistry class, you might have been looking at our previous formula and thinking, wait a minute, where is PV equals nRT? Well, here it is. Physics tends to use the big N version, which counts individual molecules and uses Boltzmann's constant K. Chemistry, on the other hand, prefers the little n version, which counts entire moles of molecules. When you switch to counting by moles, you have to swap out the constant as well, replacing K with R. But remember, both equations are describing the exact same physical reality. That capital R is the universal gas constant. If you're working in standard scientific units, meaning joules, moles, and kelvins, R is always going to be 8.31 joules per mole Kelvin. Just keep in mind, if your problem uses liters and atmospheres instead of standard cubic meters and pascals, there are other values for R, but the underlying logic remains exactly the same.
Section 5. Solving a real problem. Let's bring all of this together and look at a definitive strategy so you never get lost on a gas law test question.
Here is your bulletproof 4-step checklist. First, verify the situation involves a gas at normal temperatures. Most gases act ideally as long as they are above their boiling points. Second, make a strict list of your knowns and immediately convert everything to standard SI units. And remember, temperatures must be in Kelvin. Third, look at your knowns. Did they give you individual molecules? Use PV equals big N KT. Did they give you moles? Use PV equals little nRT. Finally, solve the equation and do a gut check. If you calculate that a standard party balloon holds the mass of the sun, you definitely missed a decimal somewhere.
Let's actually do a quick retention check to see how beautifully this formula works in practice. At standard temperature and pressure, which is exactly 0 degrees Celsius and 1 atmosphere of pressure, how much physical space, in liters, does 1 single mole of an ideal gas take up? Take a guess in your head. Okay, let's see. If we plug standard atmospheric pressure and 273 Kelvin into our equations, we find there are 44.5 moles in a single cubic meter. If we simply convert those cubic meters into liters, we land on a magic number, 22.4 liters per mole. And here is the real kicker. Because gases are mostly empty space, it does not matter if it's oxygen, nitrogen, or carbon dioxide. 1 mole of literally any ideal gas at standard conditions will always occupy exactly 22.4 liters. It is a universal law.
Section 6, Summary and the Energy Connection. Before we wrap up, let's quickly summarize what we've uncovered and connect it to a much deeper truth about the physical universe.
We've seen that both PV equals nKT and PV equals nRT are absolutely incredible tools for calculating changes in a gas. But what this equation really is, at its core, is a profound statement of energy. Look closely at the units here. The right side of the equation, temperature times the constants, literally gives us joules. It represents the internal kinetic energy of all those bouncing molecules. Now look at the left side. Pressure multiplied by volume also equates to joules, because pressure is essentially just potential energy per unit volume. So the ideal gas law is actually an energy conservation equation. It links physical expansion directly to internal heat energy. So we now know that as long as atoms have enough heat to bounce around in vast empty spaces, they behave perfectly according to this elegant, predictable law. But this leaves us with a totally fascinating final question. What happens when we push things to the absolute extreme? What happens when we squeeze a gas so hard or freeze it so completely that the empty space just disappears and those sleepy intermolecular forces wake back up? Well, the rules completely break down, and states of matter actually begin to change, and that wild journey into phase changes